As Ukrainian forces have re-entered areas close to the capital, Kyiv, after the Russians retreated, they have reported finding hundreds of bodies and mass graves in the town of Bucha. It is here and in the surrounding areas that the BBC has filmed bodies of civilians in the streets, some with their hands and feet bound, who had been shot. Russia says images of civilian killings are fake. And in the first of two reports from correspondents currently based in Kyiv tonight, here's Jeremy Bowen.
The last bleak kick of winter froze any euphoria left from Ukraine's successful defense of Kyiv. The war is switching to the east. Both sides will learn lessons. The Russians left their armor vulnerable to drone, artillery, and fast-moving infantry with anti-tank weapons. You can see the results scattered across the roads and villages around the capital. This was a Russian supply column on the main highway that runs west from Kyiv. The lorries were carrying ammunition. Artillery shells are scattered across the road. Russia will find logistics less challenging in the east, closer to its border. A few minutes further down the road, in the village of Kalinivka, were a few civilians, a rare sight, so we stopped. Irina Kostenko wanted to talk about the 10th of March, the day the Russians killed her only son, Alexei. The two lived here just 500 meters from his job, changing tires at a garage. Irina led the way to her son's bedroom, damaged by shelling weeks after he was killed. We were the first outsiders she'd seen since the Russians left on Friday, and the story of Alexei's death spilled out.
The pain is so bad. Now I'm all alone. My son was young, 27 years old. He wanted to stay alive.
Alexei was born when Irina was 18. Her life has not been easy, but she dreads the future without him. She said he'd served in the army, but that day he was going to work at the garage. After they killed her son, she fled, and the Russian soldiers took over the house. And judging by the rubbish they left behind them, they were having a good time. Loads of bottles of vodka, Jack Daniels, Bell's whiskey, beer, you name it. It is hard to understand human behavior like this, but what makes it really tragic is that there are so many accounts of it happening where Russian soldiers have been and are now in Ukraine. On her own, Irina buried Alexei in the garden after she'd brought his body back from the road in a wheelbarrow.
I covered the grave with a blanket to protect it from the dogs. He isn't in a coffin. I had to roll him in a carpet.
Did you say to the Russians, "Why did you kill my son"?
They were in jeeps with guns. They killed him and fled. How can I talk to such morons? I want them dead. I want their children to lie like my son.
Close to where Alexei was killed, opposite the house, Ukrainian troops were salvaging Russian ammunition to use it against them. They'll need it if Russia launches a spring offensive in the east. 5 weeks of war, but it only takes a moment to destroy a family. Irina found another picture of her son. "This is my love," she said. "My sweetheart." Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, outside Kyiv.
The Ukrainian government says that the entire region around Kyiv is back under its control now as Russian forces have withdrawn. Elsewhere in the country, though, fighting has intensified in the eastern Luhansk region, and there have been missile strikes on the southern port of Odessa. As the war enters a new phase now, civilian suffering continues to be widespread, as Orla Guerin has also seen.
Now the immediate danger has passed. The cost is being counted, home by home. Some damage is irreparable. Oleg Shpak takes me into his front garden, the scene of a possible war crime, where an ordinary family was hit by a Russian missile. His 2-year-old son, Stepan, was buried under the rubble. He fell asleep in bed with new sheets because he wanted to sleep in ones with stars. So my wife did that for him. He fell asleep and he never woke up again. He says Stepan knew the alphabet and could count to 10. He was lively and liked to play, but his final days were spent below ground, hiding from bombs. Not in the garden that was tended with love. The Russians may have gone from around Kyiv, but Oleg is sure the war will grind on. While Putin is alive, he'll keep trying to come to Ukraine. The war will continue unless there's a change of power in Russia and unless people learn what's really happening. A glimpse of the front lines nearby, of the battles that raged here just a few days ago. Ukrainian forces now reclaiming territory after the Russians retreated towards Belarus. It feels good, said Commander Mykola. If only we could liberate all of Ukraine, how we'd feel then. But this is just the beginning. Well, here in this area, the Russians have withdrawn. Ukrainian troops tell us that they were in a village just up the road. They occupied that village. They pulled back 2 or 3 days ago, and now Ukrainian forces are inside the area checking for mines. Villagers in Kozarovichi say the Russians fired from outside their front doors, using them as human shields. Mihailo had just emerged from the village. He says they killed one of his neighbours. His house is at the end of the street, he told me. He went home and opened the gate. He was found lying there, shot dead. For the troops, a respite. Ukraine is battle-weary and traumatised. Every day new horrors come to light. And the war is shifting now to regions in the east and the south. Orla Guerin, BBC News, north of Kyiv.
Well, let's go back to Jeremy Bowen now, whose report you saw a moment ago. And Jeremy, in that report, we saw those images of the mother who'd had to bury her son with her own hands, and you've shared other harrowing accounts that you've seen in recent days. What is the picture that is being established here?
Well, it's a pattern of behaviour. Lots of stories like that of potential war crimes. Now, the thing is, how do you prove there's a war crime? There has to be a process of redress. The best recent example was after the wars of former Yugoslavia. Now, that took years to accumulate the evidence that got the main perpetrators into jail, and it was authorized by the UN Security Council, where the Russians, of course, are veto-wielding permanent members. People are already accumulating evidence, even after 5 weeks. I've been approached by people involved in that, asking me to try to preserve what we have in terms of pictures and videos. But moving from doing that, collecting evidence, to justice for victims is another matter.
Jeremy Bowen in Kyiv, thank you.